Hello, and welcome to today's webcast hosted by the Sales Management Association. I've got a few very brief announcements before we get started today. First, please note that we will not be opening attendees' audio or video lines during our live session today. However, we do welcome your questions and comments. In fact, we have several in the queue already as we made a appeal in advance of today's session for those registered. So if you've not already submitted a question, we encourage you to do that now if you would like. You can do that in one of two ways. You can use the chat function, which is actually built right into the webinar window. Look at the upper right corner of the video display window, and you'll see a little link that will allow you access into the chat. So please feel free to use that. And a secondary way to do that is to simply email us. You can email us at support@salesmanagement.org. We're going to display the streaming reminder that you see right now on the screen throughout the session in case you don't feel like writing that email down. It's support@salesmanagement.org. Also, just keep in mind that today's session will be recorded. We will make an archive of today's session available in the Sales Management Association's resource library, where our members will also be able to download copies of those slides. Our session today is one in a series of web-based Sales Management Association presentations that feature practitioners and thought leaders in the field of Salesforce effectiveness. If you're joining us for the first time today, I would like to welcome you and also encourage you to consider membership in the association. You can learn a lot about us while you're here on our website. Simply click through. You'll see a number of things that showcase our many resources and upcoming events. Also, just as a reminder, today's session is one in a series actually on this topic, and we'll talk a little bit about that in a moment. We'll help you understand where this session fits in that ongoing series. Before I do that and introduce my co-presenter today, I want to just remind our audience of a couple of things, including, most importantly, our upcoming conference that's scheduled for March 12th and 13th at the Gozueta Business School on the campus of Emory University in Atlanta. We hope you can join us for that. You can learn more about it at salesmanagementconference.com, or you can simply click through from our main site where you are today. All right, so let me take a moment and introduce my co-presenter today, Bob Sanders. Bob Sanders is a partner at Axiom Sales Kinetics, a provider of Salesforce effectiveness solutions and services. Bob recently returned to Axiom after serving as Chief Operating Officer at Reflect Systems, a digital signage software provider. He joined in 2018 as Executive Vice President of Sales. Under Bob's leadership, Reflect Systems' recurring revenue doubled and the firm was acquired. Bob is a frequent and highly rated presenter to Sales Management Association audiences. His areas of thought leadership include sales coaching effectiveness, management development, sales training, and sales process optimization. It's always great to have you with us. Bob Sanders, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Kelly. It's a pleasure to be here.
Excellent. Let me try to also set the stage a little bit in this series. So this is really the last in a 5-part series. And in this series, we treated various aspects of sales coaching program effectiveness. We started with the session on foundations. We then talked about implementation issues related to successfully implementing sales coaching programs. We considered in the third installment assessing sales coaching program effectiveness. And then in the fourth, we considered how you actually make corrections and sort of instill a continuous improvement mindset in sales coaching. So we're now at a session that we have called Maximizing Sales Coaching Program Effectiveness. And what we would like to do in today's session is really kind of a mop-up. You might have noticed that we made an appeal for questions well in advance of this session, something we don't normally do, but we wanted to make sure that for those joining us, we had an opportunity to to carefully consider the questions that you had. So we've gotten a number of those. We thank you for those. And as I mentioned earlier, you have an opportunity to submit more or submit for the first time during the session today. So that said, today's session is really about addressing your specific concerns. That sound like a good idea, Bob?
I think it's awesome.
I hope that's also what you wanted to get done.
I was hoping that would be, because I don't have any slides. So I hope there's a lot of questions. I hope they're really hard ones too.
We have an ample supply, and I have reserved the hard ones for you. I plan on answering the questions that put me in the best light.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So yeah,
that works. That makes sense.
Perfect.
I like it. Yeah,
we're a good team. Okay. Any opening thoughts before we begin?
No, I think one opening thought I think is if somebody's registered for this or actually any of the series of webinars on sales coaching, then by now they probably already recognize the tremendous value and impact that an effective coaching program can have. And I think one of the things I would say to everybody that's on here is you don't have to get everything perfect from the very beginning. You can incrementally improve coaching effectiveness inside the organization. So I always worry that people look at it and think, oh my gosh, it's such a big initiative and I don't need another thing to add to my plate. There aren't many things that will have more impact on the success of all sales enablement, sales effectiveness initiatives than effective manager coaching. And you can do it incrementally and try not to get discouraged, because almost everybody who tries hits pitfalls and roadblocks along the way. So hopefully have some questions today that help to surface what some of those challenges are, and we can help prepare people for those.
Yeah, thank you. That's well put. In our slides for this session and in slides that we've shown in the previous sessions in this series, we've helped you build a case for investing in coaching programmatically. And we think that's how you have to do it. Though, as Bob mentioned, the challenges are significant, the payoffs are great. And so we think this is certainly a worthy thing for management to spend time on. Well, let's get to some questions. These aren't really prioritized in any way, so I'm going to kind of select randomly.
But you're going to give me the hard ones.
Yes. First, I'm going to read them silently to myself. I'm going to reflect.
And then decide, I'll take this one.
Yes, exactly. Do I have an awesome answer, which I prepared well in advance?
Right. Like they will all be answered by Bob.
That's also true. Yeah. This is how we're so efficient here.
Yes.
We call everyone Bob.
Yeah.
Anyway, here's the first one. The question is, how do we measure our coaching program's effectiveness? This person wants to make sure that the coaching program is on track and also that it's having an ROI. What's the unit of measure, or how do we do this?
Yeah, it's an awesome question. And it requires a mind shift, I think, from the very beginning. So when you are sort of at the beginning of implementing a coaching program, it's really important to sit down with a leadership team and identify what the target metrics, and I'm going to call them the leading indicator metrics really are for effective coaching. Because the pitfall here, if you will, is that people implement the coaching program and immediately look at sales performance. And sales performance is a little bit like success in athletics. You can do everything right and not win in sales. If the product's bad, if the market goes bad, if a competitor does something that's really disruptive, right? And you can do everything wrong and crush it if you've got a great product, you're in the right market, you're at the right time. So it's really important to identify what these predictive and leading metrics are. So the first thing I would say is focus on identifying the behaviors that the manager should be engaged in, and what a good coaching session looks like, for example, and how many coaching sessions you would expect somebody to have, and making certain that you can actually measure that. And then also, really critically, what impact is coaching supposed to have on the behaviors, the execution in the sales organization? So is it supposed to help people become more proficient with your methodology, which is one of the sort of the core objectives of most coaching programs? And how are you measuring that change over time? So if you're not actually measuring whether or not coaching is happening, if you're not measuring whether or not managers, when they're having coaching conversations, are actually providing their sellers with some kind of developmental activities or assignments that will help them get better at something, and if you're not evaluating the effectiveness with which those sellers execute the skills and possess the knowledge necessary to be effective, to be as successful as possible in the field, then the only thing you have is the results. And it may or may not be directly correlated. And don't get me wrong, the results will always be better than they would have been without the coaching. Shouldn't ever go backwards. However, if the market changes and it gets suddenly more competitive, or if we hit, an economic downturn, you may go backward, but you won't go backward nearly as far as you would have without coaching. So you want to correlate those other activities with things that are more performance oriented. And I would include in that forecast accuracy, not just what numbers are hit, closing ratios, proposal ratios, average sale value, opportunity pipeline flow, how many new opportunities are getting in, and then look to see how those correlate with the coaching activities. Are the managers who are coaching more actually moving the needle? Does that make sense, Bob? Did I leave anything out you can think of there?
No, I think that's good. I mean, I think what you're describing is a challenge common to training
Yes.
as well, which is
Yep.
how do you measure something that has a complex set of potential ways of influencing behavior and results. And so
Yeah, I
I mean,
know. Go ahead.
I jotted down a few quick notes just to try to summarize what you were saying. So the key things are you're measuring, you're trying to change behavior. So you need to
Right.
be able to codify what you're looking for and also observe whether or not you're getting those results. And there are two kinds of behavior here. There's the coaching behavior, what you want managers to do, and then there's the resulting behavior and selling activities that you want coaching to influence among salespeople. So those seem to be two things that are easily overlooked and also difficult to codify, I think. So that's where I think, managers, leaders in these programs make their best impact is codifying those things.
Yeah, I would agree. The other thing is I would stress that it's not just the quantity of the activities. It's not just the quantity of coaching conversations that are happening. Because if you start your program and you can be in tracking coaching, you're going to go from not having any that you've tracked to having many. It's also the quality of those. And a lot of times I hear people wondering how do we measure whether or not there's any quality happening? And there are artifacts for those things, just like the artifact for a good qualifying meeting with a prospect would be information that we've gathered from the prospect. It'd be knowing more about their business, more about their criteria, right? There are artifacts for effective coaching as well. And you've got to make sure that it's not just the activities happening, but they're executing those coaching conversations in an efficient and effective manner.
Yeah, let's talk about the difference or the appropriate way to consider those artifacts. I can see two potential risks. One is that you're generating artifacts without any substance. So it can go both ways, right?
Sure.
And the other is that you're doing some good things, but not putting a period at the end of the sentence by generating the artifact. Let's use an example about what we're talking about here. So I know you've got a good one. I mean, I have one, for example, but I'll let you describe it, as assigning something. So
Yeah.
can you just talk about the appropriate relationship between a good coaching interaction and the generation of what you're calling an artifact?
Yeah. And so when we have coaching conversations, there are sort of two levels of coaching. There's the base level, which is feedback. when we give people feedback, it's basically feedback about their performance or their behavior. So somebody's not making the number because they're not getting enough new prospects, and I tell them you need more new prospects. You got to prospect more. Now, if I simply wasn't spending enough energy on that, and me shifting my focus is going to result in better performance, then feedback's awesome. There's nothing wrong with that. And it has a place, right? It can be about it can be about behavior. Hey, you're not closing at a high enough rate because you're not qualifying well enough. You need to qualify better. If I know what better looks like and I have the skill to go do that, then that feedback is useful. The mistake, though, that we make in sales management is the assumption that because somebody's been doing a job for a long time, they know what they have to do. And as soon as we point it out, they're just going to go do it. They were just off track for a minute. They just needed somebody to, refocus their energy. And while that does happen, it doesn't happen a lot. It's a lot more like professional athletics. So if you're a golfer and you're a pro golfer and you're struggling with pulling the ball to the left, your golf coach, and most pros have a swing coach, will actually analyze that swing and figure out the root cause for why you're pulling the ball left consistently. And then won't just tell you stop pulling the ball or stop turning your hands over so fast. They'll actually give you a drill, an activity to do so that you can retrain your body. And so the artifact of that kind of coaching conversation is an assignment. So what we have to do from an enablement perspective is we have to define our methodology, our selling methodology, and all the ideal behaviors, and then have a library of assignments, because even if somebody knew how to ask good questions about the business, if they don't refine the skill and continue to improve, they can regress with that skill. And we need assignments that we can give them that will help them to further develop the skill. And the assignments, they need to be short. You can't tell somebody, I want you to go sign up for a class. It's going to take 3 weeks to get into and another 3 days to complete. It's just not going to happen. There's too much friction. It needs to be things people can get better at all the time. So an artifact from that kind of coaching conversation isn't that I checked the box and said I had a coaching conversation. It is that I gave the person the assignment, and there needs to be a feedback mechanism where I can see that the assignment worked. And that's how we get people consistently and incrementally better on a regular basis over time. Does that make sense?
It makes perfect sense. In fact, not doing that makes no sense. And so there's a certain level of absurdity about coaching without practicing or without some structured assignment, if you will, from a coach. However, I would just say, based on what we know about coaching as it exists, or at least how it exists nominally in organizations, that the majority of firms don't do that. They don't have formal assignments that they make. So these assignments are a marker not only of progress, this idea of an artifact or effectiveness, but they're also a marker for, are you really thoughtfully thinking through what coaching means in your organization? So
yeah, and are you actually contributing to somebody getting better, or is your involvement, is your value simply pointing out what they don't do well? Which, again, if they all know how to do it, but that is, I would say that is a big part of the problem. And I'll also just share with, and I think you know this about me, this is my biggest frustration with our profession. This is a performance profession. It isn't, can you qualify? It's, can you do it better than the other 4 people who will also be doing it with that customer for that opportunity? It's not, can you present? It's, can you present better than they do? Can you build more trust than they build? Can you bring more value than they bring? It is a competitive endeavor. And in all other performance professions like that, whether it's performing arts or it's athletics or it's chess, the players are being developed by the coach on an ongoing basis. And the coaches are regularly measuring not their outcomes, not their outputs, but their execution. In fact, my nephew was a college athlete, and I was asking him the other day about what it was like in the program. And he said they got graded on every at-bat, not whether they got a hit or not, but what kind of swing they were able to make given the pitch and the situation. that may or may not have resulted in a hit. You can hit a ball very hard, but right to somebody and you don't get a hit. It looks like a failure on the box score, but in execution, it's not. And that's something that if we don't start doing more of that in sales, then we're going to be quickly outpaced by the companies, the organizations that do. It's a huge opportunity for somebody to differentiate the effectiveness of their team.
Yeah, I mean, the point you're making here might be illustrated in some of the other questions that we got as well. I'm going to put a couple of these up.
Okay.
Let's see. Here's one. Our managers claim they coach consistently and effectively. That's not quite the one I was looking for. Let's see.
I can talk to that one though.
Hang on, let me fish another one out that sort of speaks to this notion that a lot of people think they're coaching, but they're not really coaching. They're doing something they're just calling coaching. So maybe we don't need the actual question, but yeah.
Well, one thing we've got to do is, just like we're talking about a golfer and their swing coach, they have to be aligned on what the ideal swing looks like. You can't coach somebody if you're not in agreement on what the target, what great execution looks like, right? And in sales, that's the methodology. Well, in coaching, it is the coaching conversation. And unfortunately, a lot of times what we do with coaching is we give managers training on how to give feedback more effectively. So we give them training, for example, on how to minimize the discomfort, how to handle challenging conversations, how to sandwich one negative thing in between two positive things, how to end the conversation with encouragement, how to draw the other person in and get their ideas about. But here's what we don't teach them: how to actually figure out the root cause of an execution gap. And all other coaches in all other professions, that's one of their primary values, is their ability to do that. We don't teach them how to give an assignment that will shrink that root cause. And so if we want to know whether managers are doing this effectively, first thing is we need to have provided them with a model that has that in it. And there are lots of coaching models, and the vast majority don't have that. So that's a gap, right? You're not going to, if your model didn't teach them that they need to diagnose the root cause of a gap and that they need to provide an assignment and remedy it, if the model teaches them, ask the person what they're going to do to fix it, that's a bad model. Because if the person knew how to fix it in sales, they probably already fix it because they make more money if they're more successful. So that's the first thing.
No amount of criticism sandwiches will.
It's not going to make me any smarter.
Right. Okay.
If I don't know what to do, you telling me I'm really, really bad at it isn't going to make it better. And by the way, you putting me on a PIP and telling me I only have 90 days to fix it doesn't help either. It's not going to make it happen. So you have to have the model. It has to have that in there. But then what you have to do is you have to model that behavior for them. We talk a lot about the first line managers. Somebody needs to be bringing them along in their skill, because that's nothing like what they did in their last job. Because for most first line managers, their last job was a sales job and they didn't do anything like what coaches do. So we have to bring them along. And then what you have to do is you have to observe it, and you have to identify gaps in their coaching. But you also have to have these interactions, whether it's an opportunity review, or it's a joint call, or it's a forecast conversation, or it's an account plan review. You have to have these conversations defined in such a way that the expectation is that there is an analysis of any gap, the identification of the root cause, and an assignment. And so you can do it empirically by looking at the assignments. You also need to make sure managers are holding people accountable for completing them. So percentage completion matters too. If one manager does diagnosis and assignment and another one does, but the first one only has half the team completing half the assignments, there's another problem there, right? But also observing those behaviors and seeing how well they're executing is sort of the joint call, the joint sales call version of elevating the skill of the managers.
Yeah. So the central importance of a model is worth maybe just hovering on a little bit. I have a few questions that I want to tee up related to this. So here's one. We've trained managers on a coaching model, but most don't appear to be using it. How can we reset with them? And here's another. Um, here's one, maybe a little more interesting. It says, we have a manager who refuses to coach using our model, but that manager's team consistently hits their objective. How should we
Yeah,
handle
and
this?
those two questions are actually, the answers to those two questions are very closely aligned. One of the most significant, I would argue, one of the most significant skill gaps in business in general today is actual root cause analysis. So what we've got here is two problem statements. And what unfortunately happens in too many organizations is when the problem is identified, people immediately go to solutioning. In some cases, by the way, in organizations, they've developed the habit of solutioning even before they get to the problem statement. So my first response to both questions is, I don't know what to do yet. I would have to find out why they're not using it. And in this particular manager's case, why that manager isn't using it. Now, there are, however, don't freak out, there isn't an infinite number of reasons, right? There are a few that are highly common. The first and most common is nobody expects them to use it. You trained them, but the manager's coaching activity isn't a part of any senior leadership scorecard. The development of the reps and the progress that they're making in their skill and knowledge and their ability to execute, nobody's measuring them against any competency model. Unlike what I described with my nephew in his at-bats, or with professional football players who are on the offensive line and they get graded on every single play, not on the outcome, but on their execution. We don't do that in sales. The only grade we give is what number did you hit, which is the root cause in part of the second problem, because a manager whose team hits the number is assumed to be doing the job well, even if not aligned with what we have defined as the ideal behavior, because the outcome is good. That is a huge mistake, because the outcome in sales can be great. And you can have, everybody has seen this at some point in their career. If you've been in sales for very long, the outcome's great, but it's not because the manager's good. Maybe the quota's too low. Maybe the territory is just that good. Maybe the people are that good. Now, maybe the manager is doing something that really is good. But if the manager is actively opposing getting everybody else on the team good, that may be because the manager doesn't want anybody else to look good and is actually not delivering enough value to offset the negative impact on everybody else's performance. But these are things that we've got to figure out. The other thing that causes managers to not coach oftentimes is not enough time, which, by the way, isn't the real root cause either, because there isn't enough time to coach. It's that other things are taking priority over coaching. Yeah. And it does get back to, what are we measuring if we don't measure that activity? Or if we make other things really difficult. I know some organizations that they spend hours every week forecasting and updating forecasts. And I hope I don't offend anybody on the call, but it probably will, because it's me and there are people on here and that's what I typically do. But I'll tell you, if you're spending a lot of time on forecasts, forecasting doesn't produce anything. Nobody sells anything by forecasting. And in fact, in many organizations, there's so much energy spent on forecasting that you're actually costing money, because people are spending their energy clinging to things that aren't going to happen because they're afraid to say they won't make their forecast. So if managers aren't coaching, first thing we have to figure out is why. Is it systemic or is it individual with that manager? This particular question here, a manager refusing to do it using the model, we really need to dive in. And by the way, sometimes it looks like they're refusing to do it because they're not good at it and they're afraid of trying to use the model because it's different. So first, we have to make sure when we launch the models, and this speaks to the reset, that we get people bought in to the model, not to the concept of coaching, because everybody thinks we did a survey a few years ago, Bob, I don't remember, we did this survey of how managers viewed their own coaching, and something like 75% of them thought they were good or very good. And then the reps, like a third of them thought they were good. So people think they're coaching when they're not. So we have to, if we're going to reset, we have to remove any obstacles that might be inadvertently created by the organization because we're not measuring it, we're not making it a priority, we're letting other things interfere. But we also have to make sure that when we launch the model or reset on the model, we give the managers the opportunity to push back on it. If they don't have the opportunity to actually dive in, push back, argue about it, they can't take genuine ownership of it. And so what will happen is they'll sort of say, yeah, the training was good, which does not mean I'm going to use it. And then they never said they were going to use it. When they get back to the field, they don't. It's not a big surprise. And now we have to start the whole process over.
I'm glad you mentioned that last part, because let us not ignore the possibility that the managers are behaving rationally because the model is bad.
That's a great point.
It doesn't work, or it's simply a wrong-headed model. And so having their input, and also having the courage, just as management, to say, even with the endorsement of managers, it's bad model. We're not doing the right things. Let's course correct this. And so these are things that we addressed earlier in the series. But
great point.
Sometimes
the person pushing back is the right one.
Yeah,
is actually, there's a reason, or they don't have the tools necessary to do it, and everybody else is faking it.
And you've started to address this point about time, about how this is a very frequent response when we ask, why don't you coach more in your organizations? Well, our sales managers don't have time. You'll remember this from some of the benchmarking research that we've done. And so this is another way of saying, this isn't considered important in my job. So this is, addressing this root cause is really about organizational priorities most of the time. Is that right?
It is. And I guess I have two parts, and then I'll come to the very last question here. But the first thing is, there are times in the organization where the frontline sales manager role becomes a conduit to the sellers and from the sellers back to other departments. And so what happens is, every product manager who wants to get the attention of the sales team starts by getting the attention of the sales manager. And everybody in sales operations who wants to make sure paperwork's done in a timely fashion, or CRM is updated the way it's supposed to be. So everything flows through the sales manager, and all of the issues come up. And there are managers who, before they even realize it, sort of get addicted to being the problem solver and the conduit for information. And what happens is, there's never an end, by the way. If you are willing to take on that role, then it'll just get bigger and bigger and bigger. And so we do have to teach managers that they can push back on those things, and that not everything requires them to be in the middle of it, and that controlling the information, forcing all of the information that's coming down to go to them and then back out, is horribly inefficient. So that's a real problem. But it's also, if we don't measure their success based on coaching effectiveness, if we didn't hire them in order for that, and I know that one of the studies showed that very few organizations are actually evaluating the manager based on their coaching effectiveness. And so if we're not, then them doing these other things, to your point, Bob, it becomes the priority work for them. So we have to create a clear picture of what role coaching plays in their job. We have to evaluate them based on that. We have to make certain that that is surfaced as a priority. And then that gets to the next question. So if they're not doing it, should we just hire other people to do it? And the answer to that is, it kind of depends. There's nothing wrong with that as a kickstart to a program. And we had a client that did this, where they got in what we would call like super coaches, right? So they certify them first, but they're not doing that so that those people can bypass the manager and coach the players. They're doing that so that they can help the managers become more effective coaches over an extended period of time, and let the managers see the impact of coaching, the impact that good coaching can have on the performance of their team, to help encourage them and provide momentum, because you can scale this with 10 people faster than you can 100, right?
In that example you're describing, is the manager also present or participating in a significant number? So This isn't, yeah. So in that way, you're seeding the skill by demonstrating it with
Exactly.
another person. Yeah.
Yeah, you're
So
not simply offboarding or offloading that job function, that role from the manager. In fact, there's always an exception, but generally that's a very bad plan, because the manager is the one who's going to set the priorities for the sellers. And if the manager isn't the one giving the assignments won't ever get done, because
and these are core management
Sure.
responsibilities and skills.
Yep.
And so, we have this question often related to designing sales jobs. Should we specialize? Should we have a separate salesperson for this or that? And, generally when you employ the division of labor principle, you increase productivity because you're separating tasks. The overall productivity rises.
Right.
Individuals become more productive, but you also increase the coordination, the burden of coordination. So if you introduce this other coach, what you want is the perfect exchange of coordinated information, which is also a time burden. So I think we have to be careful in that way.
Well, and the coaching conversations that need to happen include things like joint sales calls and opportunity reviews. If I'm going to do that independently, then we're going to end up duplicating some of those things, because this surrogate coach is going to want to do an opportunity review, but the manager is still going to want to do an opportunity review because the manager is responsible for the forecast.
I agree with your skepticism about that basic model. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So generally, it's not the best approach to separate them out. Generally, only if it's temporary and it's, like you said, it's seeding it.
Here's a request just for some clarification. Earlier in the session, you mentioned that coaching is often a multi-phase, multi-level sort of endeavor, but you stopped at level 1. Is that because you want to torment the audience?
Yes, as a matter of fact, it's
what's going on?
That is exactly why I stopped at level 1. I'll tell you what would be helpful, Bob, is if we go to slide 16.
Would that be the pyramid of coaching?
That would be the performance pyramid. So, and I'll do real quick what level 2 is. So this is how results get produced, and we've reviewed this in a couple of the other sessions. So I won't go through a lot of detail, but results, absent or assuming the environment's all the same, results are produced by the behaviors that we engage in. Now, if the market's better or worse, or we're more or less competitive, the product's got more or less market acceptance, those things all affect it. But when you hold those constant, it's all about behaviors. And that's what, as sales leaders, sales enablement leaders, we can focus on. So the behaviors produce the results. The behaviors are enabled by the skill and knowledge. However, that is built on a foundation of an individual's commitment to executing the skill, to following the model, and to getting better at it, and their capacity, or what we might hear often referred to as their innate talents, right? So the first level of coaching focuses only on the first 2 levels of the pyramid. And this is far and away the most common activity that a manager would engage in. So the first level's like the least effective. Salesperson isn't performing. As a manager, I say, yeah, you're not making your number. You have to do better. Maybe I go a little bit further and say, you're not making your number. It's because your closing ratio is fine, but you're not finding enough new opportunities to find more. Again, if I know how and all I needed was to be refocused, that would be awesome. But that is a very low percentage likelihood. The next level is I look at the behaviors. Well, your closing ratio is too low. That's why you're not making your number. Your closing ratio is too low because you're not doing a good job of developing criteria with your buyers. You have to do that better. That assumes I have the skill and knowledge to do it. And once you tell me, I'm going to, but most of the time I don't. So the first 2 levels, if I as a manager focus the conversation only on these first 2 levels, that's what we would typically refer to as feedback. Feedback is only going to be effective if the person receiving the feedback has the skill and knowledge necessary to go apply it. And they are committed to doing it, and they have the innate talents to do it. So the second level of coaching is where I diagnose the gap. That is the skill, knowledge, commitment, or capacity gap that is causing me to not execute the behaviors as effectively as possible. And in order to do that, I have have to ask more questions. So for example, if I can see that the person isn't gathering criteria, one of the things I would do to diagnose the root cause is first I have to have a model of what a good criteria conversation looks like. And I'd say, hey, let's role play it. Or I observed it and I know they can't do it. And I ask them what they've done to get better at it. But once I see that the gap is, well, they don't know the model well, or they're not practiced enough at it, I need to give them an assignment that helps them get refreshed on what that model is for that part of the conversation and helps them develop the skill. So in essence, if you switch to the next slide, what we're doing in level 2 coaching is we're going down the pyramid with our questioning that results in us giving them an assignment that will improve their skill and their knowledge. So first level coaching is just focusing on the top 2 levels, results and behaviors. Next level of coaching is when I diagnose the root cause of a behavioral performance gap, I define the corrective action, and then I circle back to evaluate the impact. Hope that helps.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Indeed.
Yeah.
So let's see, get rid of that guy. Let's go to some more questions. We had a number of questions that arose in the pre-event submissions, and also throughout the course of the series when we talk about implementation and about leadership issues. So here are 2 representative ones. Our leadership team doesn't see coaching as a priority. Any suggestions about how we can change that? And a similar question from a first-line manager who says, I am a first-line manager. We do not have plans to implement sales coaching. What advice do you have? This, reading between the lines, as a person who wants to do coaching but may not see it that priority reflected in the organization.
Yeah. So I'll go to the first question first and say there's lots of data. Much of it has been researched by Sales Management Association. If you go to the slides that we've used throughout the program, I think, Bob, you've given lots of data. There's even more out there if you want to go research. It's almost universally accepted that more effective coaches produce more effective players, produce better results across all fields. That's why, during the NFL coaching carousel that happens on Black Monday after the end of the regular season, you find a whole bunch of changes in coaches because it's not always just the players, it's the people who coach and develop them. So I would use that data because I guess we can't just change the senior leaders, huh? We can't just have them ask for their resignation or anything, because if they don't get it by now, I'm not sure that there isn't a larger problem. And I'm being facetious, obviously. It's important to make the case. The other thing is, don't feel like in order to make the case, you have to implement the full coaching program. Do a pilot. Demonstrate the value inside the organization, which speaks to the second question. No, you do not have to have the entire organization buy into the program in order to be successful. In fact, one of the most successful, most effective coaches I have ever known is actually one of my partners now at Axiom, and it's Tony Lanham. And Tony and I met when he was the sales manager for XO Communications in Nashville, Tennessee. All of XO was trained by the same company, ours. They were all taught to coach. Only 2 markets out of 12 actually did. His market and then one other one. His market was consistently the top performer. Coaching was never made a priority by the company. They didn't measure any of it. He did it because he knew that if he coached effectively, he would develop his people and they would deliver a better result. And the interesting thing was he built a culture where they were in the habit of getting better at something every week. They just got accustomed to, there was always something they were learning. There was always something they were improving. After he left, that culture continued. The next sales manager continued to be the top performing market, lowest turnover of the sales force, highest quota attainment, best profitability. After that manager left, the next manager, same result. So my suggestion to you, if the company isn't implementing a coaching program, is don't worry about it. You can coach on your own. Now, there are a couple things you want to do. Number one is you and your team need to agree on what the ideal selling behaviors look like. If, for example, and I'm just going to pick random names, if you're a big fan of solution selling and somebody else is a big fan of value selling, you're not even going to be speaking the same language. So that's going to make it really challenging. You have to pick a methodology. All these sports teams, they pick their system first. You have to pick a system. It is important which one, and we have one too, but it's most important that you get aligned on what one is and that everybody agrees this is the system. This is what the ideal behavior looks like for prospecting for new opportunities. This is what the ideal behavior looks like for having business conversations or presenting our solutions, because otherwise you're going to be debating, not coaching. Then you need to become expert at the system. That doesn't mean you have to be able to execute it better than everybody on the team. It means you need to be able to evaluate how well they're doing it. And then you start to integrate those conversations. And I think we've made the downloadable guide model available with an outline that even has the one-on-one. I think we may even have a QR code here in the slides, Bob, where you can scan this stuff. We can just give it to you. There's an outline for how to integrate this kind of a coaching model into your opportunity review, into your metrics review, and you just start doing it a piece at a time. There it is. Thank you, Bob. And you just start doing it. What you commit to on your side as an individual is, when I have these kinds of conversations, I'm going to add this tiny little piece where I'm going to actually evaluate someone's ability to execute the skill. So the other thing you got to get in the habit of doing in your organization, and this is really fundamental and it makes a huge difference, is practicing. You basically start saying, hey, if we all agree this is the model, we're going to role play every time we get together. And so the outline will get into the detail of this, but essentially what happens is when you're doing an opportunity review and you see a gap in someone's understanding, before sending them back out to learn more, to shrink that gap, just role play to see whether or not they are proficient with the skill. And if they're not, it's great to have a learning library where you can go send them. And depending on whose model you're following, you either have that or you don't. Obviously, Axiom clients have that. But if you don't, you just need to figure out some short, quick assignments that you can give people that will help shrink those gaps, and just get in the cadence of doing it consistently. It's a little bit like investing. You know, the way most people become millionaires isn't because they bought Tesla stock at the IPO. It's because they kept investing over time and they earned a decent return, but they did it consistently. So if you just do it every week, you'll be amazed at the results. And you don't need the company to do it. You can do it without any support whatsoever. And by the way, we're happy to help too. If you want to just call and talk about what you're experiencing, no problem. No charge for any of that.
Yeah, I mean, if we're cataloging the MacGyver skills required to do this completely on your own without organizational support, I would just throw one more onto the heap, which is the ability to find time among the team, and that means being able to get rid of unproductive work, and being resourceful in that way.
Yeah,
so
yeah,
ruthless
I think that's a great
about
point.
eliminating dumb stuff that your team is asked to do by others, and also carving out regular.
Yeah, in fact, that made me think too, Bob. It will also change in some cases your hiring profile. And it doesn't mean you stop hiring people that are talented or something like that, but you might be adding coachability to the innate talents of the people that you're hiring. You want people who are coachable, who accept that and are committed to getting better. You want people that want to be as good as they can be.
Yeah, that's an important point. Oh, I wanted to add one other, which is, often senior leaders are not hostile towards coaching. They're not anti-coaching. They are simply not championing it because they may not be aware of its impact, or they may be skeptical about the time commitments involved, and they're very focused on short term. So often, building a case is demonstrating, its impact in ways, that build that support. So.
Yeah, and that makes me think too, Bob. The other thing I would do if I were somebody in that position and I didn't get leadership buy-in, I would treat it like a sale. I would qualify. There's something that will cause them to buy in. Just ask them. In fact, one of the biggest sales I ever made was an internal sales effectiveness project when I was at Sprint, that all of my peers before I took that job said I would never get funded. And it wasn't actually that hard, but I didn't make a pitch. I went in and asked the senior leaders, what impact would you need to see from this program in order for you to support it and commit the money? And they told me. And so we showed them how to get that. So in some cases, it's because we're trying to pitch them on the concept of something instead of qualifying what kind of impact would you need to see and how would you need to see that presented in order for you to be confident, certain that it was going to get delivered by the program.
Yeah, good. We have time maybe for one or two more questions. So we have a question about technology. Maybe treat that one now. Questioner asked, they say, I'm always looking for technology. Is there software available to help organizations coach? Now, I promise you, this was not written by Bob Sanders. His firm markets technology.
I should have. I'm a little bit disappointed in myself that I didn't.
Right?
Like that one. I'm kind of shocked.
So we'll excuse a little commercial behavior here on your part, but also along the way, maybe you could just help people understand, what's important if you're going to try to support this kind of stuff with technology. What should you look for?
Yeah, and here I also want to point out there's lots of technology that professes to support coaching. In fact, because coaching has such an impact on sales performance, almost every technology provider will have some use case of how their technology will support coaching. For example, this technology allows your managers to easily direct your people to marketing content that will help them close more deals. That looks like it's supporting coaching. But the big difference here is evaluating the technology is a little bit like evaluating the coaching models. It's not how pretty the slides are, and it's not how feature rich it is. It is, does it solve the fundamental problem that will keep people from coaching effectively? If you believe that effective coaching isn't happening because people don't know where the content is that they want people to use, then those are the ones that you should buy, right? But if you believe that the reason that one of the biggest obstacles to coaching effectively is that managers struggle to diagnose the root cause of a performance or behavior. Oh, sorry, I forgot that was going to happen with my.
What's going on here?
It's a Mac. If I do these gestures on a Mac, then you get. And I forgot that the thumbs up thing. So yeah, sorry about that. So that's a huge distraction now. So what happens is if you believe, as I am suggesting here, that one of the biggest obstacles to managers being effective at that level 2 coaching is they don't know what questions to ask to diagnose the root cause. And if they figured out what the root cause was, they don't have a library of activities that they can easily assign and then keep track of and follow up on. Then there's software for that. That's what we build. It is not super sexy or really sophisticated. It is not a content management system. It is a learning and coaching platform that literally the manager picks the person they want to coach, launches it. They pick what kind of coaching activities they're having. Is it a joint call? What skill or behavior they're observing? They can score it because they're a competency model, and it gives them the questions to diagnose the root cause and then shows the manager what to assign. So it sort of brings together all that learning. So there is technology like that too. And there's everything in between. So I think that it is really useful to have that. And it's not generally really expensive. So even if you're an individual contributor and you want to do it, if it's not technology that requires to be implemented inside your CRM, and ours doesn't, you can get it for yourself if you want it. But I would really encourage people to leverage that. Sometimes, by the way, it's better to let managers try to coach without it first and realize that it is hard. It's hard to figure out what the root cause is, so that they don't view the technology as the obstacle. Rather, technology is solving a problem for them.
Makes sense. Well, sadly, we're out of time, so I'm going to leave it there with the questions. I just want to thank all those who submitted questions for your input. We'll respond to any that we didn't get to today offline. We'll have Mr. Bob Sanders take care of that. I'm sure he won't mind. And but before we leave, maybe just give you a chance at the last word if you have any closing thoughts here.
My closing thought is there is an enormous opportunity to build a high-performing sales organization and to really create inside your businesses, even if it's just with a team that has a sustainable competitive advantage. All performance professions benefit from coaching that is actually developing the skill and knowledge of the players. And if you will stick with it, you can really create something that's sustainable and that will differentiate your team and produce really amazing results. And we've seen, by the way, I've seen organizations triple their revenue in 4 months. So you can get really amazing results. Don't get discouraged. Don't get beat down by the managers who won't do it or the leaders that don't. Just, little piece at a time.
Good stuff. Thank you, Bob. And also, before we leave, let's just revisit something, which is the series that we've put together with your help, Bob, is available in our resource library. It includes these 4 component sessions, which you are highly recommended. And then our plans going forward are actually to distill this into a short course that we'll offer in our learning center, and we'll roll into a certification for managers who are in sales coaching program effectiveness. So you can look for that early Q2 from us. And Bob, I'd be remiss if I didn't thank you for your
always my pleasure
and your generosity in putting these programs together for us.
Yep, enjoyed it. I'll see everybody in March. Right?
Indeed.
Everybody should come to Atlanta in March, because if you haven't been to the SMA conference, you have no idea what you're missing. It is my favorite event of all time. So there's my plug. I mean, it really is amazing. So if you haven't gone, I would really encourage you. The conversations and the content is really outstanding.
Thank you for that, Dad. Bob. That was very generous. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. And you're always a highlight of that conference. So yeah, be sure to keep those dates in mind, March 12th and 13th, and join us in Atlanta. Now, before we leave, I'll with our thank yous completed, I'll remind our audience that our next Sales Management Association presentation is coming up online on February 13th. At that date, we'll have a session. Myself and Jason Jordan will be doing a session on sales process and pipeline management. So keep an eye out for that. So on behalf of Bob Sanders, I'm Bob Kelly, Sales Management Association Chairman. Thank you for your time and attention today. Goodbye until next time.